welcome to Push to Be More with me, your host, Matt Edmundson. We're going to get into another one of those stories. Yes, we are. We're going to get into a conversation with Glenn Poulos from NWS. We're going to be getting into all kinds of stuff with Glenn. Yes, we are. But before we do, let me just give a quick shout out to the website. If you've not been before, go check it out, pushtobemore.com. If you haven't done so already, go sign up to the newsletter because we'll email you all the show notes and the transcript from our conversations. They get sent straight to your inbox, which is a wonderful thing because all the conversations are phenomenal, which is no pressure, obviously, on today's guest. Now, before we get into the conversation, let me just shout out to PodJunction, who sponsor this show. If you are looking to use podcasting in your own business, to sort of do marketing, to grow your network, whatever it is. If you're like me, you run your own business, you love podcasting, you love chatting to people like Glenn, have a podcast. Why would you not? Go talk to the guys at PodJunction. They will help you get set up and established in the right way and just make sure success from day one. So do go check out podjunction.com. They will be happy to help you. Okay, so let's talk about Glenn, the co-founder and VP of Gap Wireless, a top distributor in the mobile broadband and test equipment market. He's got over 30 years of experience with sales. Oh, yes, he has. He's built multiple successful companies, authored the award-winning book, Never Sit in the Lobby, 57 winning sales factors to grow a business and build a career selling. So when he's not sharing sales wisdom or leading his team, apparently Glenn likes a bit of the old hiking, skiing, and playing pickleball near his home in Ontario. Pickleball, which is such a great word. Glenn, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Hey, Matt. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you, man.
I'm doing well. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Pickleball. How did you get into pickleball?
Someone invited me to a pickup game of pickleball one day back in around 2019, I think it was. And I'm not super sports inclined. And by the end of the night, I was able to play the game. And I just kind of got hooked. And it's now one of the fastest growing sports, right? So it's very competitive.
Yeah, so I hear.
But I mean, you can really play at any level. And so even if your level goes up or down, you can always find a crowd to play with. And I think it's become a professional sport now as well, and exciting game, easy to play, and it's a great workout, and so it's just all around fun, Oh, and,
good. Man.
It's a lot easier than tennis. Let's say that.
So I'm told. I've never actually played pickleball. It's been one of those things where I've heard a lot about it, and a lot of people do it and play it, but I've never, for whatever reason, I've never actually had a go. I don't know if it's as big over here, but I should definitely try it. It would be a worthwhile venture. Well, listen, let me start off, Glenn, by asking you the question I love to ask everybody at the start of the show. Not about pickleball, but about podcasts. As you know, this show is sponsored by the powerful PodJunction people who are perfect at promoting podcasting. And I can't think of the next word beginning with P, but I'm sure there's another one out there. You actually have a podcast, don't you? Is it 2 P's? Profit Powerhouse.
More P's. Yeah.
Profit Powerhouse. So maybe you've already had this guest on your show, but we do like to ask if you could have anybody on your podcast, past or present, that you can sit down for an hour with and just have a good old chin wag. The only caveat being that they've had to have had a big influence on your life. Who would you talk to and why?
Right now, I'd probably pick Lex Friedman. He's got his own podcast. He interviews all the top people. I probably wouldn't get the top people, the Sam Altmans and the Elon Musks and people like that, and which are all sort of on my radar. I'm following a lot of things on AI lately and how to adopt it and implement it into the businesses, and but I just feel like he's on the forefront of lots of complex topics. And he appeals to a broad audience. So he's got a wonderful show as himself. And, I'm not sure how many times he's guest versus host, but today I'd pick him. So
interesting. No one's ever mentioned him before. And I get it because, I'd be fascinated with someone, that has a successful podcast, like hyper successful, and just talking to them about what they found,
Yeah.
People like Jordan Peterson, he has a really successful podcast, doesn't he?
He does.
Who's the guy that's got the most famous podcast?
Joe Rogan?
Yeah. And people like that, whether I agree with their politics or not, I would just be really intrigued to just to pick their brains about the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think it would be really quite fascinating, wouldn't it? And just learn from them, because these guys have seen stuff that and experienced stuff that I never will, in many ways. And I think it would be quite fascinating. How did you get into podcasting?
Well, it sort of came out of, I wrote the book in 2020. It kind of came out in 2022. And then I started getting into attending and sort of podcasts or being a guest on podcasts in promotion of the book and, the building of the obligatory brand, which is now required for such things. And and then I kind of enjoy the process and being interviewed and what have you. And I thought, I can also, put my own spin on interviewing other people. And so I just thought, hey, in addition to being a guest, I'd also like to be a host. Right. And so that's how I got into it. I picked Profit Powerhouse because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of people that are trying to become entrepreneurs listen to me and talk to me and want to collaborate and what have you. And so that's the kind of message that I'm sharing. People that are building, 7 and 8 figure type businesses and the steps they took, where they're at, and stuff like that.
Do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy the podcast?
Yeah. I had to take a few weeks off because I sold the company, right, the NWS Gap Wireless that I worked for, and I finished my time with the private equity as a matter of fact, in December of 2024, and so and I moved with my wife to Florida, and we're starting on another new venture, and and so I wasn't able to keep up with the schedule right now, so I've just got it on pause for a few weeks, and so it's a lot more work than I realized to host it is than to attend and to be a guest. Yeah. And the back end, of course, is a lot. But I'm really, I'm really well entrenched in adopting agents and AI type tools into my day to day, and I found it to be invaluable for preparing for a really thought-provoking interview with each one of the guests by using AI to help me. And because I could come up with the same questions, but it's just so much faster, right? And and so I was really enjoying how that was playing out, because I can upload entire, sort of not the entire history, but people's media kits and their website and their LinkedIn and put all this together and say, look, I want to talk about this subject, can we come up with 40 minutes of questions, to get some thought provoking, conversation going. Right. And it would take me hours to come up with that. Right. And I can come up with it in 10 minutes and then I can, curate it, and I still have to deliver the content. So again, it's just a tool, right? And but in the right hands or whatever, it's invaluable. And
so, how have you found? Your expertise and knowledge, Glenn, is obviously in selling. That's what you have done for a long time. Your book's about sales, and you're what I would call, if I'm allowed to put it this way, sort of the old school sales guys. You started in 1985 from what I can see, and so you sort of came through that whole period, the what I would call old school selling. I started probably my sales career, let me think, in the mid 90s, so probably about 10 years behind you. And I still think, even at that point, I'd done quite a lot of sales, and my influences were all the old school sales guys, right? Zig Ziglar, for example. Love that guy. You would listen to everything that guy had to say. Then there's been this massive technology shift. We had the internet, we had email. Now we have AI. Do you think AI is, you're obviously using it for your podcast. How do you see it with things like old school sales? Is it impacting it in a good way, in a bad way, just in a way? I'm curious to know your thoughts.
Well, it's kind of like I'll give you a bit of a convoluted answer, and but it's a tool, right? And so, when you put tools like drills and saws and levels in my hand, you don't end up with a masterpiece construction because I'm a crappy carpenter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so putting the best tools from Milwaukee or whatever in my hands and saying build a house, not going to happen, right? And so, I'm not going to be able to use AI to build me a house either, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so because I'm taking the tool and putting it in the hands of the expert, who's then taking that tool and becoming a more powerful version of themselves, right? And that's the way I see AI, right? And so, and a lot of people I thought you were kind of going to go along the lines of, where things are becoming virtualized and stuff like that. And often like, oh, your old school stuff was great in 1985, but it doesn't apply anymore, right? And so I always start with the same analogy.
I would say it's the opposite, though. I'd say old school stuff applies more now than it ever has done.
More than ever, right? Yeah. I totally agree. Because, people are arguing, well, I can do it over Zoom and I don't need to make sales calls and I don't need to be in front of the customer. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, great. So let's say your business is super successful. You're doing hundreds of millions of dollars. And guess what? The company decides you're getting a jet. You get to buy a jet. And it's like, okay, I'd love to invite you on a Zoom call where you can then take a virtual flight on your $50 million plane. Mm-hmm. And then you can virtually meet the captain, the co-pilot, and the flight attendants. And they'll gladly give you a virtual walkthrough of the plane. And then you can give me $50 million and I will send you a plane. Yeah. Right. And I'm like, well, no, I'd like to go on a test flight. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So then I guess selling is important, right? Like the whole point is that you have to, when people are buying things, they want to buy from people. They want to touch it, feel it, see it. Yeah. And, and as a salesperson, if you're not in front of the customer with the products, then you don't know who is there in front of the customer with the products. Because I can guarantee you somebody is, and that's probably the person that's getting the order, right? So my whole thing is about how to act and stay in front of your customer and be a pleasure to do business with always. Yeah. That's the whole thing I'm trying to build. And I'll use every tool in the game in order to do it, right? Some of the times I'm on the phone, email, text messaging, visiting, dropping by, but ultimately one of the things is getting in front of the customers. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I call selling. And that's what I'm paying my top salespeople to do, is to be in front of the customers. And everything else for me is marketing. And I'll gladly use every tool available today to give me an advantage, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a powerful thing, isn't it? I mean, my expertise, I suppose, is e-commerce, right. And I'm often asked, about online marketing. What's the latest tool? What's the latest gadget? What's the latest silver bullet? It is usually, in essence, what people are asking. Is there a shortcut to go and find $1 million in extra revenue somewhere? And my go-to answer, because I get asked that question a lot, my go-to answer is actually, there's no point in us having this conversation until you have mastered old school principles. Because if you've not done those well on an e-commerce website, I don't think you might look out and sell a whole bunch of stuff on TikTok Shop because that's the latest fad, that's the latest trend. But there's no longevity in your business. You're going to be around for a little while. You're like a firework kind of a thing. And it's the businesses which master this sort of I love this phrase, old school, this sort of the old school principles of what Zig Ziglar called the know, like, and trust. Do they know you? Do they like you? Do they trust you? Yes or no? Yeah. If the answer to those questions is no, well, hang on. Why? Do you know what I mean? And so I think it's really interesting talking to you because like you, I think these things should have they're the principles. Like someone said to me the other day, what's a book you would recommend still to this day? You would really want your kids to read. I'm like, How to Make Friends and Influence People. Right. Straight off. Great book. Do you know what I mean? It's a great book. It's like, go learn that, inwardly digest it. And you're like, well, it was written a while ago. Yeah. But the principles are still the same. And people are still the same. And psychology is still the same. So just go read that book and inwardly learn that book. What is it that you think we're losing with this? Sound like a real old fart now. And forgive me if I am. But what is it you think we're losing with all this latest tech?
Well, I would say we're at the risk of losing. I don't want to say that we are losing it, but I mean, we're definitely at the risk of losing, people's ability to get in front of the customers because they think that they can do it all virtually. Right.
Yeah.
And I always like to joke that, in the sales department, all the chairs, the nails are pointing up. Right. And so that basically when you sit down, the chairs are not comfortable and I don't want you in the office. I need you out in front of customers. And they're like, oh, but I can send an email. And, I'm like, oh, you sent an email. Did they answer you? And they're like, no. And I go, what'd you do next? He said, oh, I called. I go, what did he say? He goes, well, he didn't answer. I go, what'd you do? I left a voicemail. Oh, okay. Did he call you back? No, he didn't call me back. I'm like, oh, okay. So you've sent an email. He didn't respond. You've called him. He hasn't phoned you back. So basically, nothing's happened. Right. Like, And so I need you to somehow figure out a way of getting in front of that customer, right? And I mean, there's obviously lots of tricks and sales training that you give people to help them to do that, but I mean, we're at risk of thinking that we can do things automated, like I can get the AI to answer my phones for me, and funny as I got a call this morning from an AI, it's fascinating and frightening and infuriating all at the same time, right? But it was insanely well done. Like I don't know what system they're using, and it was for an AI type event that I signed up for, and I could just tell because there were a couple of pauses and things, and and it was asking me, are you going to be on the call tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific? And I said, well, no, the call's at 9 a.m. Pacific, and then it started interacting with me, and it figured out that I was actually enrolled in a different course and stuff. And it then confirmed that I was coming. And the pauses got tighter and tighter as it, and I was thinking, oh my God, this is incredible. And the voice was so natural. Like, it was the pauses at the beginning that triggered me that it was AI, right?
Right.
But I was thinking, oh my God, like this is amazing. and I mean, they're calling thousands of people to get on these seminars, right? And so AI is invaluable. Like, if I was doing a seminar to my customers, I would probably still call them personally because I really need to get them to attend, and it's not as many people, right? And, so in some cases you can use the tools to get the job done, but not at the risk of the personal touch, right? And because the business that I started in 2007 and sold to NWS, and then I retired from a few weeks ago, was the whole DNA of the business was around being a pleasure to do business with. And part of it was things like always having a human answer the phone, not leaving people in voicemails, kind of things like that. I would always, tell people the humorous story that when you hit, when you pound 0 a bunch of times on, when you get mad and you want to get to an operator and just go 0, that would immediately send the call to me. And we had almost 200 people at our company at the end, right? And so it's a lot of people, other than me that could be taking the call, right? And then somebody's like, oh, I need, help with this. It's broken or something, this and that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm the president or I'm the owner or whatever. I can probably give you, and they're like, I'm talking to the owner. And this was back maybe when I owned the business, but, I did sell it a couple years ago, and people were always amazed by that. And, and so, those are really important aspects of operating a business to me. And I wouldn't want to lose those, in fear of, using too much automation. Right.
Yeah. It's a really powerful point, isn't it? Because I think we've got so used to working remotely. I can do everything from my 4-screen supercomputer around me, and actually just getting out and seeing people, still one of the most powerful things you can do. This is where actually I find podcasting really a unique mechanism, because I've found in the past how I got started in podcasts, Glenn. Back in 2012, I had a beauty website, and I wanted to buy a product from a certain brand and sell it on my website. But for love and money, I could not get an account set up to buy the products from that particular brand. They didn't want to deal with any more internet accounts.
Yeah.
And so I tried to call the CEO. So, my team called their team. Nothing was going on. I thought, well, maybe if me as the guy that owns a business calls their guy that owns a business, maybe we can do this sort of a bit, a bit more on those terms. I couldn't get through the receptionist. She was just brilliant. None of it was happening. And that's when I had this brain fart and just thought, well, you know what? I called him up. We just literally had started a podcast like a few months before. And we called the company. I said, listen, it's Matt here. I'm just calling because we have this podcast called whatever it was called. And I would love if the CEO would come on this beauty podcast and just talk about the state of the beauty industry. I don't know if you'd be interested in that, but we would love to have him and talk to him for about an hour or so. I get put straight through to this guy. So whereas before there was a complete, blockage, I get put straight through to the guy. I didn't mention anything about our company. He knew who I was. And I was just like, listen, dude, we've got this podcast. This is what it's about. These are the kind of things that we would love to talk to you about. Are you game for it? It's like, totally. So we set a time. He comes on the podcast. This was back in the day when I don't really know what I'm doing now, but I definitely didn't know what I was doing back then. And we must have talked for around 2 hours. And we put that amazing podcast out there. I don't know if anybody listened to that podcast, but what I do know is he and I had such a great time. By the end of that call that we had to record the podcast, I had the contract that I couldn't get before because the podcast had opened the door and it created an opportunity. And this is where I think face-to-face work really works really well. It creates an opportunity to have a much better conversation. Yeah. And a much more real conversation, whereas email doesn't allow me to do that in so many ways. Yeah. Zoom doesn't really allow you to do that. And I know podcasting is a little bit like Zoom, but when you come on a podcast, you expect to be vulnerable quite quickly. I don't expect to do that if I'm on a Zoom call and you're demoing a bit of software for me. Right. And so there's something about creating this environment, creating this space where really good conversation can happen. That seems to work. Whether that's in person or whether it's like what we're doing now with a podcast. Yeah.
No, that was a genius strategy that you used. And if someone had, often people challenge me to ask me that question, like, how would I get that CEO on the line or what have you? Cause I want to sell those products or something. Mm-hmm. My suggestion would have been something, it wouldn't have been that like the podcasting thing, because that's not sort of maybe now it would be, but I mean, over the years, but the same, I use the same the same science behind what you were doing with the podcast is you're moving as my dad would say, you're putting the emphasis on the opposite syllable, right? And you're shifting it from being, needing something to providing him something, right? Yeah. And so, and you're feeding into his, his needs a little bit more in terms of giving him an audience and building his brand. And obviously, so, now he's coming from a different perspective, which allows you to then get what you need later. Right. Yeah. And I always, with other sales scenarios, like how else would I do it is I would become the best salesman for the company that I want to sell to. In other words, so, a common thing that I do use, and I talk about this in the book several times, is, finding business for my customer, right? And that's by learning my customer's product as good or better than they learn it. And then I look for ways of bringing together other aspects so that I can call the sales manager, the vice president of sales, and say, hey, look, I've done this really good opportunity for you, such and such. I thought I wanted to reach out to you and da-da-da-da. And by the way, also need an inroad to your vice president of engineering. And he's like, okay, well, why don't you drop by and then I'll introduce you face to face and blah, 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 And so, and it works amazing. Right. And so I share that technique a lot, actually.
But again, this is old school principles, isn't it? You're actually, what you're doing is you're creating value for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've
and
spent
it's hard
some
to do
time.
that remotely, right? And that's why I always want to get in the door, get into the lobby. Don't sit in the lobby, right? Never sit in the lobby. It's the name of the book. And then get behind the lobby door and learn what's really happening at the business, right?
And understand
that's where
it.
you really figure stuff out, right?
I get the emails. I don't know if you get them, Glenn, quite a lot from companies going, you love what you're doing with the company. They have no idea who I am, right? But they love what you do with the company. And we've had a look at your website and we think we've found 5 ways that you could improve that website. Give us a call to discuss. I'm like, you lie, right? Straight off the bat, you're telling me a lie. I don't trust you. You're waiting for me to call you. Then you're going to go away and figure out 5 things about my website that I can improve. But I think it's much better to go, hey, Matt, listen, I know we've never met. Here's 5 things that we found about your website that we think if you fix them straight away, that would have a big impact. Here's what they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, presented in a nice, simple way that I can understand it. If you'd like to talk to us about any of these things, we'd love to chat with you. No questions asked, definitely no pressure. We're a web company. We just love to help people do much better on the website, on the internet. And if that's you, then great. But I think it's that whole delivering value, like you say, isn't it? It's that we're going to be super, super helpful. And lying is never a way to get me to believe you're going to be super, super helpful. But you're trying to. Because again, this is AI, isn't it? Oh, we found your name. We'll mail merge it with your company name. And it sort of looks a bit more personal.
Yeah. I would follow up that email as well. And I would say, hey, Jack, I sent you that email with those 5 tips. I actually found another tip. I'm hoping I get maybe 15 minutes on your calendar, and I leave a voicemail, never less than 20 seconds, never more than 30 seconds, get straight to the point, add something of, that will appeal to his sense of greed as well, as I call it, right? That he can get something out of it and a desire to, and then he may or may not call me back, but then I'll say, I'll follow up my email in a few days. And then now I've had the email, then the phone call, then the email, then maybe another. And, it takes usually 7 times, right, to break through the mental paradigm. But I mean, just sending those emails can be really challenging. I mean, I tell a lot of people, in the company that I just left, I got so many emails that basically I had to go through the process of I would see the email and it was like, can I delete this email without getting fired? Yeah. Right. Delete. Right. And so, because there was just so many of those things that you're talking about, I couldn't even open them or look at the preview of them. And it would just be like, no, delete. I'm not getting fired for these ones. Right. You got to have to come up with a better way of getting a hold of me. Right. And, and they, and so, there are some people like the cyber guys or whatever. It's like, oh, by now you must have been hacked by the Russian hackers or whatever, because you're not answering any of my emails. But this is my last time I'm reaching out to you or something, and I'm like, we already have the cyber stuff, right? Like, so it is a bit of an art, though, too, and what you have to do. But
well, I feel like we've just gone and put the world's to rights on selling. So, which is great. You've obviously had quite a long career in this whole arena. You've built your company, sold it. I'm curious, Glenn, what's the biggest challenge you've had to face?
Well, so the biggest challenges that I've had to face were obviously the people were always the biggest challenge, but that's kind of an easy go-to one, right? So, not following the advice of hire slowly, fire fast, right? Fire fast, hire slowly. Take a long time to hire someone, but if they're wrong, get rid of them right away, right? Yeah. And if somebody asks me, when do I know if I should fire a guy? And I'm like, well, have you ever thought of firing them? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, well, when was the first time? And they're like, well, last February when, that's when you should have done it last February. Because it never gets any better. Right. And so the people is always a challenging thing. But I don't have a magic bullet for hiring all the best people, but if you do adopt the slowly fast methodology, you don't keep the bad performers and set a poor example for, because you set a baseline of expectation and it creates a rising tide of expectation for everyone else in the business. Like, oh, this guy came on, he was a bum. I saw he was a bum. Hey, guess what? The boss saw he was a bum and we fired him. Yeah. Right. So I better step up. Right. And so that helps a lot. The other biggest challenge was there were, there was one time where, I don't know if you're looking for something specific or just in general, right? But I mean, there was one time at the business where we had two divisions, and we let a division manager break a cardinal rule, which was to make a decision that could bankrupt the company, right? Like we don't allow decisions to be made that could bankrupt the company. You know what I mean? Like buy this, invest in that, something, and that if that went sour, that you would be bankrupt. And, through a series of decisions that he had made, we were dangerously close to, and so I made that mistake. And then, the biggest challenge for an entrepreneur is you have to be good at becoming kind of a general manager. And, and the title I always had at the business was VP and GM, and then executive VP and GM, but I always maintained that GM title.
Right.
Because to me, the GM is the guy who's responsible for everything. Every department funnels into the general manager: finance, operations, sales, marketing, IT, customer service, all of it funnel into the general manager. He's responsible for everything. And the biggest challenge for me was I had to come up to finance for the non-finance CEO. You know what I mean? Like that whole course, you have to understand cash flow. You have to understand credit, your loans, your covenants with the bank, when to spend, when to pay off, all that stuff. And it doesn't come naturally to everybody. I mean, some people are just eagle-eyed on it. I wasn't. It was a learned skill for me. And so the biggest challenge for me was overcoming my lack of innate finance, accounting background with just brute force learning of what it was, right? And spending time with the finance people, to stay on top of it rather than taking them at their word or what have you. And so those are some of the challenges that I had.
And did you have, throughout your journey, did you have like a partner to work through this with, or were you just the sole owner and found it quite a lonely space?
Yeah. So I started a business in 1991, which we sold in mid 2000s, and I had two partners, and it was invaluable. And we all had different kind of roles in the business. And in the new business, I had one partner, and I was the general manager, and he was more of the technical CTO and CRO, customer facing, and I was the overall running of the business. And it was invaluable having the partner, and so I highly recommend it, having a partner. It's great. The only thing is that if you have a partner and you're 50-50 and you sell the business for 10 million, you only get 5. Yeah. And if you're Canadian, the government takes a huge chunk of it. So now you're down to, you know what I mean? 3 and 3, and then you pay HST on it, and that's 15% off the top of everything. Before you know it, your 10 million becomes 2, right? Yeah. And so, you have to be very careful about equity, and don't give away any equity which you can buy the talent. You know what I mean? Like if you need, like, say, a CFO, then you don't need to bring in a guy, give him 50% of the business because he's a smart money guy, right? Yeah. You can hire them as a CFO. If you can't afford him, hire a fractional CFO. Yeah. Right. So honestly, like, I left the business that I had sold with my partner. We did almost 3 years with the private equity. We left, and now I bought a new business. This one I bought 100%. And I'm taking the last 30 years of experience of running these two businesses, and I'm doing it myself this time, and with no partners. So that's where I'm at as of today. Yeah.
It's interesting to hear you talk, because I most of my business life, I've had partners over the various seasons. And I've found that immensely helpful at times. But I think if I was ever not going to have a business partner, it would probably be sort of now onwards, really, because I feel like, I don't know, maybe my experience is, I don't think it makes me cocky. Maybe it does, I don't know. But I think having had the experience that I've had, I just feel a lot more comfortable in my own skin in terms of running a business, maybe.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm. So what have you bought?
Yeah, so I bought a company. Of course, I had a very elaborate non-compete selling my business to private equity. Yeah, no doubt. I had to change industries, technologies, and countries. So I moved from Toronto to Florida. I changed from telecom to power generation, but I bought the exact same kind of a business. and it sells high-end instrumentation to the power generation and distribution. So the companies that deliver you electricity, right? They generate and deliver you electricity. And I've never really worked with that kind of business, but the cycle of buying a distributor that buys products from around the world, imports them into a country, and then repacks them and sells them to domestic customers. That's the business I understand. I've ran for, I started in 85, so I'm now at like 40 years, right? And so I can apply all the principles that I know about running a successful distributorship, to an established business, but I'm on side for all my covenants of having sold my telecom company in Canada. And, and of course there's only 6 or 7 people in the company. So I'm really going back 18 years from when I started Gap Wireless, and it really was the most exciting time, and I'm, more energized than ever. It just, every day brings sort of something new now, and I'm quite excited about what the future's, brings, and, I did pretty good when I sold the company. So it's not like everything's on the line or anything, but it's still, I'm only 62. So, I'm also taking it very seriously about this, my last kick at the can. And, so I'm enjoying it, and the weather's a little better than it is in Canada right now, but not much right now.
Oh, okay. Is it okay?
Yeah. This week's kind of crappy,
okay.
But yeah.
So what do you? I mean, I get why you would move down to Florida from Toronto, and I can see the different climates, different countries, different cultures. Maybe Canada's just gone and lost your prime minister, haven't you?
Yes.
Someone explained it to me. A Canadian guy who lives in the UK said, we have lost Jeremy Corbyn and we have got Boris Johnson or something like, Nigel Farage was what it was. We've lost someone completely on the left and gained someone completely on the right, which I find fascinating. But I'm curious, what do you do to stay sharp? What do you do to fill your tank, to recharge your batteries? How do you stay on top of your own game?
Yeah. So I'm also, believe it or not, I'm a charity DJ. And the reason it's called a charity DJ is because I don't charge a lot of money, but since I've been 17 years old, I've been DJing events and things like that. And, and so on a regular basis, and it's like, well, how do you find clients? And I said, well, when you don't charge a lot of money, believe
they
me,
find you quick.
There's lots of opportunities. I have to turn down more than I can accept. But, and so, I mean, my biggest recent gig was, of course, New Year's Eve, but it was a huge event. It was in Canada. It was in Toronto, and it was downtown, and there were a lot of people. It was super fun. And I mean, and that group, which is a charity, and they've reached out to me with 5 more dates over the next 18 months. Like, could you do any of these events? Right. And so I love DJing and playing around with music, tech, and, I'm kind of on the geeky side for playing with, technology kind of stuff.
Okay.
Right. And then, I do play pickleball, a little bit. In Canada, we have a place, we call it Up North, which is kind of in the cottage country. So love going, and it's in Blue Mountain. So it's nice there. And here in Florida, we're only a few minutes from the beach, and can take the dogs there. So I love to go to the beach with the dogs and walk around, but nothing much more complicated than that. And, and I'm always fascinated on different things, about the business and I'm really hyper fascinated with AI right now. So I'm overwhelmed at this pace with the tools are coming out, trying to look at what it's going to look like in a year or two from now coming back. There's video and graphics and audio tools, every kind of tool. There's 10 a day coming out, right?
Yeah,
so how is it going to roll up and get all absorbed into probably 4 or 5 main companies that are offering, super packages or something, that companies can use.
Yeah.
And so I'm playing around on the side a bit with that as well.
Wow. I see you're a busy man. Can I ask, do you have any regrets?
Yeah. Well, Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question, but you know, I'm not sure I would have done anything differently, honestly. But you know, I mean, it's not like I've had a flawless personal life. You know, I mean, I've had a divorce and things like that. And you know, could I have done things differently in those regards? And those, when you ask me that kind of question, those are the kind of questions that pop up, right? Work wise. No, not really at all. Like, I mean, unfortunately, I had good partners. I mean, do we always make the right moves? No, but in the end, it all worked out. And, you know, and so, no regrets in that regard, but I've always, I'm always questioning, I've always lived the best life and been the best parent and, the best partner and stuff like that. Right. So I'm always questioning myself in that regard.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think most people that run businesses do, because you devote so much time and energy to the business, and there are just some days where you are absolutely exhausted and you don't feel like, actually, I'm being a good dad or I'm being a good husband here. And I remember over the years I've done projects with some of the wealthiest people on the planet through various companies that I've owned. We had access to various number of people that are super wealthy people. I could mention names and people would know who they are and go, "God, geez, yes, there's a lot of money." What was fascinating to me, because I got a chance to talk to these guys and spend time with them, and which is why podcasting is a really good fit for me, because I'm a really nosy person. I don't mind asking really awkward questions. And I would ask them a very similar question. A lot of them, what kind of regrets do you have? All of them was to do with family. They'd made insane hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, pounds. And you kind of go, well, in the world's eyes, you're insanely successful. But what haunts you at night is the fact that you're a failed father or a failed husband. And it was really insightful, really fascinating. And I think that's true. You don't have to be super successful to have those things plague your thoughts at night. You really don't, especially as entrepreneurs, because you do divide your attention 25 different ways. And so, no, I'm not surprised at all, Glenn. I think it's a common thing. What does it look like in 5 years then? So 2025 we're in now. So let's say we get to 2030. Are you still in Florida? Are you still?
Yeah. So if I could work it perfectly, in around 3 to maybe 5 years max, but hopefully 3, sort of flip this company to a bigger company and do a shorter stint than 3 years with the private equity or whoever buys it, maybe 12 to 18 months, hand it over, and then try to go on a more definitive retirement path, buy an RV, drive around North America. I would still have a place in Florida and a place in Canada, and sort of divide my time between the two based on climate and and then just start to relax a bit. And who knows, I might do something then. I wouldn't, but in my mind, what I see is me sort of slowing down a bit in that time frame. And there's a fellow I met where he's a doctor who he ran a medical practice that he kind of sold, and look, he got I don't want to call it life-changing money, but he got life-making money. Like, he's retired now and he's got lots of money, and he has lots of kids that are related. He's been married a few times. They all had kids, and there's 5, 6 kids involved they have kids. And he made this thing where he said, look, I'm not going to buy you a car. I'm not going to buy you a house. I'm not going to do this, but I'll fly your whole family to Disney World, but I'm coming, like I'm going to come with you. Yeah. Or you can come and spend time at my, huge cottage up north. We can play on the boats, but I'm going to be there. And he's sort of spending their inheritance. Right. And, I really look up to what he's doing, and, and he's getting lots of great time with his kids, his grandkids. Yeah. And probably making up for lots of lost time. Yeah. And I'd love to be able to do something like that. Right. Yeah. And, Yeah. So.
Yeah, why not? Why not? It's interesting. Glenn, listen, I'm aware of time, man, and it is ticking on at a pace. If people want to reach out to you, if they want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Okay, so you can always connect with me on the website, glennpoulos.com. But if you want to, talk to me and collaborate with me, LinkedIn's really the best. I'm there every day, and I'm a LinkedIn top voice, post all the time. Connect with me there, reach out to me, send me a message, and happy to talk to anybody or look for ways of collaboration.
Fantastic. We will, of course, link to all of that information in the show notes, which you can get along for free on the website at pushtobemore.com. And of course, you get, if you're listening to this on your phone, the podcast app, you scroll down, the links will be in the podcast app as well. But Glenn, listen, I really enjoyed the conversation, man. Super, super fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great just to talk about old school. And just go back to how it all sort of started for me, really, and sort of start thinking about that. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that conversation. Huge thanks for coming on, man. Genuinely, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Wow, that's a wrap on another great conversation. Massive round of applause. There we go. Woo-woo. For Glenn for joining me today. Huge thanks also to our sponsor, PodJunction. For you entrepreneurs out there contemplating podcasting, you should just go right ahead and do it. Just talk to the guys at podjunction.com and let them know I sent you. They're great, great people. Now, remember, keep pushing to be more. Don't forget to follow the show wherever you get your podcast from, because we've got some more great conversations lined up, and I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, let me be the first. You are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have got to bear. Glenn has to bear it. I have to bear it. You've got to bear it as well. Now, Push to Be More, like I say, is brought to life by PodJunction. For transcripts, show notes, head to the website, pushtobemore.com, all one word. But that's it from Glenn. That's it from me. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.